Now, when Death Battle ends up talking about something I have some knowledge on and says something horrendous, you are usually going to hear me and Godspeed get on the mic to debunk it. I am not a hater of Death Battle. I can come to appreciate some of the good that they have done, and I can definitely admit that they have improved significantly over the years and are a good source of information to the general public when it comes to trying to get into power scaling. However, me and Godspeed today are going to be doing something a little bit different. We are going to be instead talking about the potential arguments they are going to be using, how they're going to be going about judging the winner of the fight, and who the winner will inevitably be. So rather than us talking about the matchup in our opinion, we're actually going to be saving that for after this death battle. So enjoy me and Godspeed just kind of yapping while you watch me and him have a Pokemon showdown battle with him using a Yugi type Pokemon team versus a dream team of Ash's aces. So the first category we will be breaking down first are the main arguments that people usually use when scaling both universes. I feel like the biggest problem here that Death Battle is going to have established before even getting into the matchup is what continuity we are going to be using. And judging from literally any death battle ever, 9 times out of 10 they are factoring in a composite version of the character, allowing them to use as much material from both verses. Which, you know, I get it, it's completely fair. You want to try and draw as much information as you can from that said universe to draw more fans. And considering this has been a well-requested matchup for years, along with just a ongoing debate for time, considering as well this has been a requested matchup for years at this point for Death Battle, I sincerely doubt they are going to be limiting the continuity here. With that being said, we are more than likely going to be seeing things like infinite powered statements from the god cards or statements and lore from the monsters within the games or anime. Now, this goes without saying for the Pokemon side of things, with more than likely the entire anime up to Journeys, Pokemon Adventures, and pretty much any big feats from the main games, all are going to be fair game here. And although this sounds very exciting, this is already a problem in itself, more so for Pokemon rather than Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, it's still a problem for Yu-Gi-Oh! Don't get me wrong, because all things considered, the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime and manga and games are all pretty relatively scaling the same. Now, that isn't to say that Yu-Gi-Oh! Still isn't going to have issues here. Despite the anime, manga, and games all having pretty relatively stupid scaling, the problem is that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a card game, and depending on the certain card or monster Yugi wants to use, he has to meet the certain means or rules set for that card. And you already know when it comes to power scaling and scaling versus like this, you're gonna have that one guy saying, well, technically Yugi has to do this to actually summon Slifer, so realistically he would never actually get to that point. Which I can definitely see being a factor for Death Battle, thus making the scaling for Yu-Gi-Oh! Very shaky. But I mean, within Yu-Gi-Oh! There is a fun little gimmick called Shadow Games, where we quite literally see the cards come to life and directly attack the user. The users as well also emit duel energy, which they use to go and battle enemies, similarly to how Beyblade characters use their spirit to go and fight other people. So for those who want to say, it's just a card game, this argument is completely thrown out the window. Now, of course, there are obviously going to be certain cards that do not function the exact same way they do in the anime as they do in real life. However, I don't think this inherently changes Yugi scaling. My main worry is factoring in not only them simply ignoring how certain cards work because of it simply being different in the anime to real life, like Time Wizard for example, in contrast to the worser problem that we're going to have to be dealing with, that being Ash, who instead of getting nerfed from something like merging these continuities together, he would actually get significantly buffed. This is because his main scaling in the anime is, like, honestly just all over the place. He's gotten beaten up by Bellsprouts and Snivies and has also beaten up legendaries, one-shotted the strongest Ultra Beast, and has beaten the world's strongest trainer by this point. You see, for Pokemon's case, the anime, games, and manga all just have different scaling. For example, beings like full-powered Zygarde in the anime scale much differently than in the games, especially given the added lore in Legend ZA. Zygarde at his peak is unironically one of the most powerful legendaries, with him exceeding well beyond at the very worst Planetary. He's more so comparable with those like multi-solar to potentially universal level fighters, but compare this to Zygarde, who in the anime at full power simply just threatened the entire planet, and Ash doesn't really even scale to him at all. He loses to Alon, who tries tussling with a weaker Zygarde, who just beats him up anyway and gets ridiculously stronger. It seems as well, generally speaking, legendary Pokemon can fight one another in the anime, and this is mainly shown to us in the Hoopa film, where we literally see all the box art legendaries Dialga and Palkia included, by the way, just fighting each other. And mind you, no matter the continuity you're talking about, these two legendaries I just mentioned are simply just known as the creators of space and time. And mind you, these two are getting rocked by Rayquaza, the same guy who's only known for disrupting two legendaries that threaten the planet themselves. You could just say that this is upscaling Rayquaza or maybe downplaying Dialga and Palkia, but we know, at least in the games, that Dialga and Palkia are at the very worst universal. Another big example of this is Ash in Sun and Moon, who legit one-tapped Merged Lusamine with a Z move in the anime, who we know in the games was taking hits from a Dawn Wings Necrozma. This is a being capable of absorbing all of the light in Ultra Space, including the Ultra Wormhole, which are portals to alternate worlds, or in this case, universes. However, this scaling is nowhere in the anime. At best, you could say these guys are threatening the planet, which is relatively consistent, given not only the Gen 3 legendaries and Zygarde scrapping with top tier trainers, but we end up seeing the same Cynthia that fought Dialga and the same Steven and Alon that survived their encounters with the Hoenn Trio and Zygarde, and a stronger Ash that has fought multitude of legendaries at this point, all competing for the best. And yes, Ash ends up as the strongest trainer, but it's not like the gap between Ash and Steven is really all that big, especially considering Ash barely beat this guy. Some people think Steven should have won, and plus, there were other contestants in that tournament that were stated that they could have potentially beaten Leon. So, with that being said, if we were just solely taking the anime into account, the best I can say for Ash, with me being very generous to him and not including his anti-feats, would be Ash by the end of Journeys should be around that multi-continental to possibly planetary range in terms of power. And this only applies to his Journeys team and Ash Greninja. None of Ash's other Pokemon even scale to this stuff. And so you can clearly see if we give Ash the manga and game stuff, it's a completely different ballgame, because Cynthia in the game scales to the same trainer that was able to put down Giratina, and Ash would go on to beat this same Cynthia. And obviously, if we give Merged Lusamine her cosmology that she has in the games, then Ash would be, like, unironically 4D. However, it's just as likely that they are going to be mentioning Ash's anti-feats and his questionable losses, which might attribute to him actually losing to Yugi due to him being kind of stupid. However, I don't even think this is relatively consistent with Ash, especially by the time of his prime, because yeah, the jump from Sinnoh to Unova is disgusting, but Ash by the time of XYZ, Sun and Moon, and Journeys, he really stops making stupid mistakes and just kind of locks in finally. But the main point that I'm basically trying to say here is that trying to scale the Pokemon anime to the games and manga is going to be very inconsistent, and you're not going to be able to satisfy the majority here. Because yes, even scaling Yu-Gi-Oh to Pokemon is already questionable. You're going to be saying stuff like, oh yeah, with this description, this guy can cut a moon. And then they're going to say, in contrast to Ash, it's like, oh, well, Ash can fight Abomasnow, who in the game, if he learns Hail, can cover an entire town with it. It's like, bro, we're kind of pushing it at this point, and like, Pokedex entries are commonly used for scaling, and I'm not really mad about that. I use it sometimes, especially when it's purely just game scaling alone, but you can't really correlate stuff like this to the anime, because it's not like Wolfric's Abomasnow is island level because a random Abomasnow in the Gen 6 games can cause a hailstorm. Putting the characters against each other as composite versions is going to be too inconsistent for anyone to really keep up.
When talking about things like speed and hacks, I think it becomes a whole different ballpark. Ash's Pokemon are dodging lightning bolts and sun rays like it's just the next gym battle, and consistently react to legendary Pokemon's attacks. But Yugi's monsters are a bit hard-pressed for the calculatable feats that Death Battle loves so much. I see them mentioning Kaiba's Blue Eyes traveling to space to blow up a satellite, and maybe Summon Skull's lightning attacks for speed as well. And if we're lucky, we'll at least get to see them comparing Yugi's monsters to Neos's massively faster than light travel speed feats in Yugioh GX. They may just give him all of the Millennium items, which can do things like read and control minds, see the future, and even destroy souls. Not to say that Ash hasn't dealt with his fair share. They'll probably bring up his resistances to his versus own mind manipulators and elemental attacks.
Ash as well as someone clearly physically built different as well, which might factor into the actual fight considering they did this for the Pokemon versus Digimon matchup. He's caught blazing Flamewheels that have legit put Ursaring on their ass. He takes lightning from Pikachu constantly, even if we all laughed at it as a kid. This is an actual feat for him. Ash even decides to throw hands with Mewtwo himself in the first movie after all hope is lost. Like, if it really comes down to it, it's Like, if I'm being honest, it might just straight up come down to Ash versus Yugi, literally, as that is the name of this death battle. And if they were to go this route, Death Battle more than likely is going to be giving Ash the W here. Now, in Yu-Gi-Oh, we have seen things like, oh, Joey surviving the blasts of Ra. However, we know that when you're dueling, you have some kind of spirit or aura that obviously wouldn't be emitting if they engage in fists. This is what's known later on in GX as Duel Energy or Ba in Duel Monsters, meaning when Ash is battling Yugi and Yugi is utilizing his deck, he's using his Duel Energy and not his actual physical stat. Which is why me saying, oh, Yugi is universal because of X card, it starts to not really sound all that ridiculous. So to conclude our predictions, we'll start off with mine, that being that I think that Yugi is initially going to actually start off stronger than Ash, leading into Ash then engaging in fisticuffs with Yugi, and in which Ash would just straight up beat up Yugi. That's my prediction for the death battle. What about you, Godspeed?
I think that they'll give Ash the win as well, but I think it'll mainly come down to his variety in his Pokemon choices, as he has just so many, and that he has a greater bond with his Pokemon than Yugi probably has with most of his cards. It's what allowed him to become stronger and surpass everyone in his own verse, whereas Yugi kind of started at the top.